All right, I'm back. It's been a month. I want to say that I was not, I did not want to be gone for an entire month, and it's very frustrating to have to deal with these problems, these constant problems and issues, starting with my hard drive from my laptop dying and failing, and then having other work related issues pop up. Now, summer's around the corner here, and having to deal with more yard work and just a lot more work outside in general. Not this is on top of my 7 day work week as well. So there's just been a lot on my plate that I've had to deal with, and it's very fatiguing. So there are days where I get off work, I do more work, pass out, get ready to go to work, and just rinse and repeat. I will say that over the past month, I was able to get some meetings set up with some of the missionaries, and unfortunately, only the missionaries for the Latter day Saints church that's in the area. I want to say that I'm very surprised by everything. It was overall a positive experience, even though things are definitely different than what I expected and how they went. So there's a lot of good things, a couple bad things to wonder, definitely some questions and concerns, but overall, things did not go as I had expected, but they went better than I expected. So, there is a lot to say here, and I won't try to drag things out. I'll try to keep things simple. So, for the most part, the positive stuff that I have found that I saw was the fact that the kids and the families were more and actively involved in that particular church. It's a blessing being able to see communities and families being built up, because that is not always the case in church, because there are many churches that put their mission first, that basically it's them, not the individuals. And that is wrong on a personal level. I don't think churches should be all about the mission. I think it should be about the families, about the area. However, I understand that missions are important. I just don't see them as the main focus. Second, kids were being focused on too, which is a good thing. The fact that there's even kids there is a good thing, because kids should be in an environment that should be, safe. Now, whether or not, okay, so you have, if you have personal issues with the Latter day Saints, the Mormon church, that's understandable. There are definitely some things that I will be bringing up in a little bit that should be mentioned. But for the most part, kids should be focused on they should be protected. They should be in a safe environment, because them seeing the reality of the world and how people are is devastating. So, in a sense, preserving their innocence is extremely important. Now, even though I personally do not use or sing hymns, I will say that it's definitely a good thing to see hymns being used. I didn't recognize any of the hymns when I looked through the book, and I was just when there was moments I looked through the hymns that were there, and I didn't recognize a single one. But even still, it's good to go back and check out hymns from time to time. It's a part of our history as a country and as a church. I will say the third point that was very encouraging, that was very positive, is that even though the lessons and teachings go by a different name, it's encouraging to see that they're still being taught. Teachings help to build one's foundation. Now, this ties specifically with after the service, when the men got together and they invited me to follow along, and we just actually ended up sitting and talking about some stuff. And it was very interesting hearing their teachings and parables and stuff, and how it actually compares to like the stuff in the Bible, or rather some of the parables and stories and stuff in the Bible. The fact that the Bible wasn't used much in their church service did kind of bother me, but there's a lot of things to say about that, but personally I noticed that, and I am pointing that out. I'm hesitating on whether or not I should say more about that. I want to say that if you claim to be a Christian and yet you don't follow much, if anything, from the Bible, there's issues there that you should reevaluate your life and your choices and who you're actually following. If you're following the church and they're leading you away from the Bible and they're trying to like get you off on something else, that is wrong. But I want to say for the most part, this surprised me when I looked more into it. The fact is, as long as Jesus Christ and God the Father in the Bible is not being messed or tampered with including the divinity of Jesus, then I personally have no issue with that, because it's the same Jesus, the same God that's being talked about. And I've noticed that many of the people there, their hearts are in the right places. And I haven't talked to everyone there, but there was definitely quite a few that I did talk to. I want to say that it's encouraging seeing people talk about what they believe and hearing their thoughts. Even if I disagree with it, it's still good to actually hear what they're thinking and believing and all of that, because conversations are incredibly important. Not just simply, asking yes/no questions, but actually delving into stuff as far as with that individual, with the personal stuff. So, yeah, moving on. I am a little discouraged by the lack of just seeing the Bible in general in that particular building. So that's just the main thing that just kind of bothered me. I will say that the last thing that really was positive that I noticed was the fact that the young men, the missionaries, and the other men that were a part of the service actually are given places and jobs. And there's a lot that they can do and have volunteered to do. So they have a place, they have things to do, things to keep them busy, and positions that they can work towards. Young men in today's day and age, they do not have much to work towards, and that is a growing issue, because when young men leave home, they're finished up high school. What do they have? What do they have to work towards? College? I mean, it's hard enough getting relationships off the ground and going. So if you don't have a job or a relationship, realistically, there's not much left for you to focus on. But seeing the church actually involve the young men is encouraging. I want to say that was one of the most important things that came across to me that I needed to speak out on, because that is missing and is sorely needed elsewhere. And I mean in the churches, the Christian churches and all that. Now, this is more of something else that I did briefly mention, but if the divinity of Jesus is removed or not there, and they and God are changed and tampered, all of that, I want to say that I would have to ask any Mormon, how would you consider yourself to be a Christian if these are two entirely different beings talked about? Because God and Jesus are the center of Mormonism and Christianity. The fact that Mormonism comes across as very acts and works oriented, very similar to the Catholics, even Judaism to a point, and where Christianity specifically is different than is by being saved by faith and then by grace. So it's not that your works won't amount to anything, but it's that the works that you do here will not be able to be enough to save you, and that it has to be with your relationship with Jesus. You call upon his name, he will save you. He will be a part of your life, and you seek in a relationship and all that. These are points that separate the Latter-day Saints from Christianity. I want to say that it will take time, because there is a lot there, And I believe there's many half-truths mixed in with non-scriptural components, and I mean non-biblical scriptural components. So I believe them to be false, inaccurate, and there is no history that I found that supports most of what I found within Mormonism as a whole, both on the scriptural side, just on the scriptural side. I want to say that there's notes that I took that just ended up hitting me rather oddly. And this does touch upon some very interesting points like witchcraft and all that. I'm trying to see where I put this down here. They talk about redeeming of the dead with prayers, any recognition of spirits or demons that could be tied to the spirits of the deceased that could very well be influencing them. And the fact that Joseph Smith used I'm trying to figure out where I put this. Yeah, all right. This wasn't printed out. Let's go back over here real quick. So Joseph Smith used a seer stone, and I was wondering if there's any connection with witches and witchcraft and Wiccans, as they also use stones. I won't get into that here, but I will point it out. It's very interesting to note that. So the spiritual stuff there can open one up to attacks by spiritual beings, so to speak. And the fact that Joseph Smith himself declared that he was not a learned man makes this further clear that he could have just jumped straight into stuff and gotten his mind ended up being taken advantage of. I do not believe he was possessed. I do not believe anything like that happened. But I believe he could have been demonically influenced a number of ways, including with the seer stone that he supposedly found. Honestly, it could have been given to him by someone else, but that was never made clear. The golden plates that he found also, or that he claimed to found, along with some of the original members, 3 who ended up being excommunicated, who changed their stories. And I want to say that the conflicting stories makes it very highly questionable for me to just be able to straight up believe that. So these physical components to this day have not been able to be found, and there is no resting place for them to be visited. Going off into archaeology, the coins, the currency, the Valley of Nimrod, the plains of Mephala, like these places that are talked about were never found. They're never able to be pointed out like they're right here on the map. So, as far as archaeology goes, there is nothing there that I found that actually confirms their history. And when I've actually pressed them, gently as far as asking about their history, I was basically given a response about how, from the missionaries, that it was their job to talk to others about their faith and not to question it. And I asked them like a couple different ways, like, well, how do you learn if you don't question? How do you get past some of your own struggles if you don't look into them? The thing is, if the history's there, then it's very much a faith and a belief that you can go off of confidently, because there's something there that you can fall back on when you're going through issues and crises of faith. So, yeah, like there are answers found in history, even if it's just you. How do I explain this? So even if you're the only one in your particular area and there's no one else who shares the same faith, if you look into the history, you can learn a lot about the faith that you are following. Except I'm not seeing that here. I want to say that I actually had to end up leaving that be because there's just too many questions, not enough answers, and I felt like it was just going to cause issues and problems. And on top of that, some of the history actually points negatively to Joseph Smith, Hans Mill massacre, and I am not aware of too many other major events except for the Exodus that the Mormons had to go through as well. So Joseph Smith, him and his brother ended up dying when a mob broke into the jail, and this was after he was arrested on account of treason, I believe, in Carthage, Illinois. So I want to say that the dissenting Latter-day Saints in that day had issues, but they ended up ultimately silenced one way or another. However, the state ended up getting involved due to violence and other issues that are not made clear to me. I think there's a lot more behind it that just does not make it look good on any level. And I want to say that for the most part, I can't really talk much about it because it just doesn't come across well. And on top of that, as I repeatedly told the people there, like, I'm here looking for a discussion. I'm not looking for I'm looking for being able to meet with them in the middle and having a conversation about their faith and seeing what they're willing to share and to talk about. And by digging into this enough, I got the point here that there's just a lot that is not talked about, and that is left alone for multiple reasons. And the fact that the archaeology does not really support a lot of this stuff is one of them. So when I did ask other specific questions as far as points in the Bible that talk about grace, that talk about mercy, and if there was anything like that in the Book of Mormon, I want to say that the missionaries did point some stuff out there, and I will be uploading some of the audio that I was allowed to record, and I want to say that there's a lot there. So in many ways, this video is the video on all of this, but the audio itself I will be uploading after this. It's excellent. You will definitely not regret listening to it because there's a lot of good questions left and right. My only regret is that the best meeting that I had was not able to be recorded, and I completely forgot. So that is entirely on me. The best one is just not there. But the other two are still excellent and just they're just good all around. I want to say that one of the questions that I really wanted to ask about that I never got an answer about, that was never even brought up because we just ran out of time, and this was for the last meeting, was about pride. Pride can be associated with works, especially with a works-based faith, about everything that you've accomplished. Now, this is a fundamental part, a difference between Christianity and the Latter-day Saints, as how you earn your way to heaven versus your place in heaven is ensured by your belief and faith that Jesus Christ paid for your sins. That's why you have to call upon his name to be saved. So it's not about works, it's about faith. It's about being forgiven. I want to say that there's definitely more, because the Bible does talk about getting into heaven by the skin of your teeth versus having shown that you are a faithful follower. And the difference there is that you show yourself as a follower by what you do, by your actions, by your history. But your acts and history are not enough to save you and get you to heaven. So I was not able to ask about Christ and his return or Satans and demons. So that does kind of bum me out quite a bit. So there's some good questions that were just simply not asked or even talked about, which does kind of bum me out. It just some good stuff here that just completely just flew right over. And I'm not going to be pressing upon this because when I'm trying to get into good conversation, I have to see what the other people are interested in talking about, rather than just trying to force things. You don't force conversation, you don't force topics. But if there's important things, you could say, there's multiple ways where you could say, this is important. Can we talk about this? And what about this stands out to you the most? Stuff like that. The fact that there is a specific angel, I am completely blanking on this, but there's a specific angel talked about in the Book of Mormon. I'm going to look this up real quick because I can't remember for the life of me, and I know macaroni. Oh, I'm saying this wrong. I'm butchering it. I know it. Oh, I'll look this up real quick. Angel Moroni. There was no C in there, so apologies. Angel Moroni is angel whom Joseph Smith reportedly as having visited him on numerous occasions. Yes, that the fact that there is a difference there and in the Bible, I believe I will go out on a limb on this since I have not found verification on this yet, but I believe that angel is not even mentioned in the books that are outside of the Bible. I do not know if that's true, but I am not aware of that anywhere except in the Book of Mormon. So if there's any other recognition of the spirits or demons, I would definitely be interested in that because this is incredibly important. When you have a faith that actively deals with prayers for those who've passed away and the other things that I mentioned, there is definitely there's a higher likelihood of encountering spirits and demons. And it's worth noting that if you do not have precautions before meeting or talking with or dealing with them, you're likely to be influenced without even realizing it. All right. Now, the fact is, I did ask whether or not it was even possible to redeem the dead because from what I'm aware of, all actions, all opportunities are at an end when an individual passes away, and that they themselves cannot be redeemed and they cannot pass on blessings. So I specifically asked, is it possible to redeem the dead? And if so, when do these actions or prayers end? And I want to say that I wanted to ask about any superstitions that were possibly passed on, because I think that could also be relevant as well. And the fact is, even though there are very many similarities between Christianity, Mormons, and the Latter-day Saints, ultimately it seems like the direction of the church is very similar to that of those who are Catholic, with the Catholic Church, rather than Christianity. So I do feel the need to point that out. Okay. So I want to say that when I gave a little bit of a kind of like a personal aspect from me where I was coming from, it made things interesting because part of the reason why part of the questions that I was asked as far as why I was interested is because when I told others I'm a Christian Taoist and that I focus on balance and I focus on the journey, I focus on the path more so than the destination, it opened up some really good opportunities about like that you will also hear in the audio. But for here, it's not about the what or the who, it's about the how, it's about the why, so to speak. And being able to understand things while going through all of this that I was not able to before is something that I've come to appreciate. I believe there's a saying on in the World of Magic the Gathering, it's on one of the cards. I'm trying to remember this one particular card here. It says, the student finds worlds of meaning. The master finds worlds of meaning in the search, and the student finds. It's basically the opposite of that. So one finds meaning in the destination, and the other one finds meaning in the journey. And I can't remember which card that is. It's not even relevant. It's just pointing out that the journey, the passage, the way, all of that is something that I've come to really appreciate because, as I've said before, I don't have any issues with the Mormons as long, the two parts, as long as Jesus and God are not changed. And the fact is, by bringing people to to the knowledge of Christ and saying that, Christ is, I'm saying this all wrong. Jesus is the way to God. That is what I believe. I will not press upon that anywhere else or on anyone else. But for those who call themselves Christians, if they diverge away from that, how can they be Christians? There's something off or wrong if you are going to God any other way except through Christ. Christ is the gateway. He is polarizing in that sense where it's either him and if you want to get to God, it's either him or you don't get to God. And I know that can cause problems or issues. So finding ways to put that is incredibly important because I am not looking for fights. I'm not looking for drama. I'm looking for discussion. I'm looking to see what other people think and what they understand and then try to get that recorded for clarification. I want to say that many other Christians, including my parents, say that the Church of Latter-day Saints and Mormonism is demonic and evil. I will leave my parents out of it, but when I did talk to them, it was very negative. It was very I will not put words in their mouth. All I will say is that everyone that I've talked to has said that the Mormon Church is negative and wrong, evil, and there's a whole bunch of other words out there. But from my experience, even though there's a lot that is not supported by history, and there's a lot of scriptural issues, including, this was rather important, didn't mention this before. Give me a second. Including over 4,000 changes to the latest Book of Mormon compared to the first Book of Mormon, and how there are 9 different versions. And as I've noted, if there are any keystones to any faith or belief or religion, why would there ever need to be any changes? So, and also the Song of Solomon was completely removed as well. I found that to be interesting. Yeah, so changes. The structural integrity of this belief is something that I question along with the history. And I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful about it. I really don't think that will cause any I think that will just make things worse. So asking questions, trying to dig into it a little bit, be sensitive because this stuff does matter, and asking the wrong questions, especially, I will use this example. I've personally seen videos of people talking to Muslims and having good conversations, and then those who were on edge, who wanted to be violent afterwards because they felt that Muhammad was being disrespected and that Muslims as a whole were also being disrespected. Now, here's the thing. If you know someone is wrong and you believe it in your heart and you don't want to ask any questions, move along. End of story, move along. There's just no need about that. Now, the other parts that I find interesting that are different is about priesthood, for example, and baptism. Mormons believe that baptism is a part of it and that it is needed. Like, it's a part of the process of being saved. Whereas Christianity it's a showing of your faith, but it is not a requirement. And priesthood, I think that is tied to responsibilities and to the titles, the positions in that particular church and their temple, so to speak. That I don't know how many temples exist, but there's at least one in Utah that others were talking about. So if you want to be a part of the main body there, you would have to go up the levels of leadership, so to speak. And one of them is being ordained and having a priesthood there. And I actually remember asking about, like, well, what if you're a priesthood outside of it in another faith? You know, like the Catholic Church, for example, with being a priest. That doesn't translate over into this in this faith at all, and I find that to be interesting as well. I don't think I asked about if there's any popular authors like C.S. Lewis for within the Christian environment, but I wish I was able to ask that, because that would have been pretty good, being able to write down some authors and look into them as well. So basically, there's minor discrepancies, when they talk about prophets, because Mormon was a prophet that Joseph Smith, the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is a big part of them, is about Joseph Smith rediscovering what Mormon had talked about, hence why it's called the Book of Mormon, and how he was a great prophet, so to speak. When they were mentioning other prophets like Adam, Noah, Abraham, and Moses, and I was like, well, what about Elijah? What about Elisha? Like, these were two excellent prophets that were talked about in the Bible as well. And there was no mention of them anywhere about that. That could very well be a discrepancy, or it also could just be like, well, they're next to be listed. They just didn't have any space for them. I was like, well, okay, fine. Another interesting point that I brought up was about, well, when does God stop loving and start punishing? And I don't think I ever asked that, but I wanted to ask that, because the God in the Bible seems to be very different from the God in the Book of Mormon. Grace and mercy are a big part of the Bible, so to speak, in the New Testament. The Old Testament is different, where it's more structured around what God said, and there's less leniency, less ability to forgive. And I think that ties in with the lifestyles that the Jews and the other people had, because here's the thing. Things are very slow, and people probably live to around 40 at the very most, and then, like, what I'm trying to say is there's not enough time to change. There's not enough time to be someone new once you are set in your ways. So in that sense, you don't get the same opportunities then. There aren't the same opportunities then as there are now, since there's the medical world is able to extend our lives and to help remove issues and problems, and helping even to replace parts that fail. So we are able to live longer, and we can change. We can become new versions, better versions of ourselves. Back then, I don't even think that was a possibility. Now, I will say that this ties on to it, but it goes off in a slight side trail here. But I believe this is a reason why masturbation and porn were not issues back in the Old Testament days, is because the people married at a very young age, and the fact that there was these positions, not in Judaism, but in the surrounding nations with temple prostitutes and all that. So there was access to women readily, and many were quite available at that point in time. So there was no need for certain things like that. This ties in with just not needing to change, and that everything was already there. So God putting groundwork and not really having the room to be lenient is something that I've noticed. And I know that other people have, pointed out like God is he's a God who only cares about punishing. He doesn't care about anything else. He doesn't care about, forgiving us if we mess up and all that. Honestly, I would just point out and just say, hey, if you're basing this off of like someone's father, who's just gone from that kid's life or just abuses the kid, I understand. Or even they themselves, because many people have said that their father was gone or just beat them. I'm just like, well, your first representation of who God is through your parents. And that's bad if you have parents that are like that, either just gone or just simply abusing you. Or worse, later down the road, using you for your benefits and money because, they didn't plan out properly or things just failed. I've heard of that too, where parents just use their kids once they were settled up and all of that. It's just awful. So yeah, when does God stop loving and start punishing? That's a question I wish I would have been able to bring up and ask about. I want to say, I completely forgot mentioning this, but when talking about priesthood, with the Catholic Church, when I was doing some digging into this, bishops are supposedly directly getting their power directly from the apostles, from the 12 apostles. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So there's definitely some history there as far as like the bishops having their power being passed down. And when they are succeeded by someone else, they pass down their power to someone else. And I'm like, that ties in very nicely with priesthood in the Catholic Church. It does not come out the same to the Latter-day Saints, though. So they go through entirely different rituals and all that. I will say one of the last few parts, though, about the dissenters and the people who were a part of it, who basically denounced and changed the whole thing with apostasy and all that. I believe they deserve to have a voice because they were a part of it and they have their own words. I cannot really talk much about that, though. And there's one person, Ruin for short. There's more, but that's pretty much his nickname, Ruin, who was a part of the Church of Latter-day Saints, who I've talked to, and he doesn't like me at all. But the thing is, he claims to have been groomed by those in the church, and he has severe trust issues, similar to me having trust issues. And once he realized he was just basically, he claims that he realized he was being used and then being groomed, and that he grew paranoid, I believe. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I want to at least be in the ballpark here as far as with why he ended up falling away. He's a part of one of my Christian groups, and I've talked to him about some stuff, and I was like, if we're going to be talking about any of this, he needs to make sure the personal issues are out of the way, because I have nothing against him. But, if you're not making that clear on your end, please do so now, because I don't know why you're here. Yeah, so as far as someone who has issues there, he's one of them. But for other people, there's 2 videos that I've seen of people putting stuff together in. They raised up some very good questions, and I can't help but say that if any of that's true, it's damning. It's just straight up damaging on many levels. And I could understand why the church would want, the Latter-day Saints church would want that buried, because it makes them look bad. Now, I want to say, when coming down to the Christian church, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's thrown out there, and all of us are just like, well, it's your personal experience, or you did actually get mistreated and abused by other members. I mean, there's no one. People are fallible. We make mistakes. We cause issues. We hurt others. Crime happens. We are not perfect, and it doesn't matter where you're at or what place you're at in your life. It does not matter. You're going to make mistakes, or you're going to commit a crime. the thing is, when church and faith and beliefs are involved, you're on a path to be better. And for Christianity, it's a relationship with God through Jesus. So you should be more like Jesus and less like yourself, less like your old self, so to speak. And I want to say that is incredibly impactful because people who are willing to die for the faith are showing that they are willing to be better, to change, to be more than who they are. So I want to say that, and overall, even though there are fundamental differences between myself and even so there are fundamental differences between myself and other Christians and Mormons and all of that. So like there's differences between all of us, and I want to point out that in some ways that's okay because it's personal. Why are people getting upset and to the point of being violent over what is personal? I believe this. Okay, cool. You believe that. Can we just meet in the middle somewhere? Or if not, thank you. Let's just go our own ways. There's no need to get violent and to fight over this stuff. Like, it's wasting time, it's wasting energy, and you're burning bridges that don't necessarily need to be burned. Because here's the thing. Some of the best ways to learn is from other people who are on the outside. Or those who have different point of views. Back 40 to 50 years ago, you could actually see people, Democrats and Republicans, sit down and actually have good conversations because, hey, we're on opposite spectrums here. Let's bring up a good argument, a good discussion, and let's get this recorded and put it out in the public. Now you just got people attacking each other on personal levels saying, you're wrong, and I'm right. Or worse, one of the strategies that was pointed out to me was the whole, you don't even need to make yourself look good. You just need to make the other person look bad or look wrong. You just got to make them look worse than you. Okay, that could be viable as far as a strategy of discrediting someone, but proving why you're accurate, why you are right. That's not happening. And when you're talking about faith and beliefs, that's needed. You need to have a foundation from where you're coming from when you're talking about this stuff. So overall, the experience was positive, even though there's a lot of things that I disagree with that I don't like. Everyone can have their personal opinion on this stuff. Sure, go for it. But just because it's personal doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It's based off of something. Anyway, I'll just probably end there. The audio clips that I'll pull from my phone, I'll upload it separately and just say, you'll just put them under like meetings and stuff, like first meeting, third meeting, that sort of thing. It's good stuff. It's worth your time. Now, I will say this. Enjoy your time. Don't need to rush through this. Oh, one last thing, too, since I'm staring this right in my face the entire time. The restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. When I talked to the missionaries, I was like, I believe not that the gospel needs to be restored. I believe it's personal and an individual life. That we need to renew ourselves, to be better versions of ourselves, to renew ourselves, to become better, The fact is, we can stagnate as people in every area, every aspect of our life, from our families, our relationships, to our faith, our belief, even to what we once held close to us. Like, this is who I was when I was like 20 years, when I was like 20. Now, for me personally, I was a soldier. I was in the Army for 10 years. So that was my identity. That's how I saw myself. That has somewhat changed, and it will continue to change further. So I want to point that out. All right. Hope you all enjoy this. I would like to get your thoughts down below and pass this on to others.